I rise to oppose this partisan rescission bill because it represents a complete surrender of Congress's power of the purse, one of the singular responsibilities under the United States Constitution. It will hurt America's standing in the world also, and finally, and tragically, it will cost lives. We are considering this package at a time when the Trump administration has frozen congressionally enacted funds, illegally impounded funds, and threatened to cancel unspent funds at the end of the fiscal year. Now, the administration is back asking Congress to ratify even more cuts of programs that we agreed to on a bipartisan basis, and in many cases were signed into law by President Trump. I know that many of my Republican colleagues recognize the danger this proposal represents beyond its devastating cuts, yet few are willing to oppose it. The Trump administration claims it has found over $9 billion in wasteful spending at the State Department and the Corporation of Public Broadcasting, and it points to some seemingly egregious examples of frivolous spending. Now, I won't defend outrageous waste of taxpayers' dollars. No one should or could. And if we were just voting on the examples some of my Republican colleagues like to highlight, I suspect that kind of bill would get bipartisan support. But the longer the administration's examples of waste are scrutinized, the more it seems that they may be exaggerated or even fabricated. Indeed, according to a New York Times report yesterday, the Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vogt, his testimony that $9.3 million was spent, quote, to advise Russian doctors on how to perform abortions and gender analysis, close quote, was patently false in almost every respect. Even if we accepted all the administration's examples of waste as gospel, they don't total up to anything close to $9 billion. But these cuts, if we approve them, will come from somewhere. As Senator Murkowski pointed out last night, we have been given big, broad categories where funding might be cut, but the administration won't tell us which specific spending they plan to terminate. That was evident in last month's Appropriations Committee hearing with Director Vogt, who simply evaded my colleague Senator Schatz's reasonable questions about what specific programs he would cut. The attitude he displayed was, don't worry, you pass this bill and we'll find the waste and get back to you later. That's not the way to run a government or a company or anything else. And make no mistake, the likely decision by OMB and the Trump administration are likely to be as bad as they are ill-informed. We've seen this repeated and repeated. Doge, Elon Musk making statements of the billions he saved, et cetera, and discovering that those billions evaporated quickly under analysis. Discharging people, unnecessary people, then within days calling them back. That was the case with the National Nuclear Security Administration. Again, not thoughtful analysis and practical programs, just slash and burn. This bill will eliminate close to $1.1 billion in funding for the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. This would not simply affect funding for National Public Radio and National PBS. It would result in funding cuts for local stations like Rhode Island PBS and the Public's Radio, which lose about 10% of its funding if this bill passes. And the same story will play out in every state and with independent local news and civic discourse taking the heat just because of the president's command to the majority party. And that is the flavor, really, of public radio because it is so decentralized. Stations in Kansas are carrying local news, local personalities, local issues, the same way in Rhode Island. That'll be lost. But this bill is also likely to eliminate funding for educational tools. And the wake of the deadly flooding in Texas and elsewhere, do my colleagues really want to support a package that cuts funding for emergency alerts. The bill would also cut $7.9 billion from the kind of global assistance programs that are crucial to our national security and our efforts to compete with China economically and diplomatically. These programs are also the embodiment of American idealism and morality. As Catholic Relief Services wrote, and I quote, "If passed, these rescissions will directly impact the United States' ability to protect human life and promote human dignity, to advance U.S. and global peace and security, and to foster economic development that benefits U.S. taxpayers and people living in poverty around the world." And that's from the Catholic Relief Services. The cuts on the table also include $500 million from global health programs, which could affect efforts that have successfully slowed the spread of infectious diseases, along with cuts to life-saving humanitarian assistance. One proven program that could see drastic cuts under this rescissions package is the disbursement of ready-to-use therapeutic food, or RUTF. RUTF is a specialty product to treat severe malnutrition in children and could be impacted by the proposed cuts to UNICEF included in this package. Unfortunately, we have already seen this administration's disregard for the life-saving treatment provided by RUTF. Edicia Nutrition, a key manufacturer of RUTF, is based in Rhode Island, and it has been forced to curtail production and delay shipments of life-saving therapeutic food, which has sat in warehouses unable to get to children who need it because of the Trump administration's needless slow walking. If OMB really cared about waste, it wouldn't have this food aid and millions of tons of wheat and other crops sitting and rotting rather than distributing it to children who need it to survive. These are products made by American workers using domestically produced food to prevent millions of children from starving to death. And funds for RUTF have been included in appropriations bills on a bipartisan basis under both Republican and Democratic majorities and administrations for years. Also included in this bill are $1 billion in cuts to UN contributions and $4.9 billion in cuts to international economic and developmental assistance, and it threatens funding for global democracy. These international assistance programs are not just helping people in developing nations, they also provide an outside value to the United States, building the soft power and credibility that makes us a leader on the international stage and helps us confront our major adversaries. If we eliminate these programs, we will be ceding that authority to China and Russia, who would like nothing more than to displace the United States' global leadership position. Indeed, if my colleagues truly want to improve the UN, they need to recognize that every time the U.S. steps back from an international organization, the Chinese swoop right in, gaining goodwill and advantage and leverage on critical problems. We are not part of the law of the sea because we have not ratified that treaty. China is, though. And we talk about precious, rare minerals that are in the ocean. Guess who's going to be deciding how those are allocated, what are the rules of extraction, et cetera? Not us, because we're not part of that international organization, but the Chinese certainly will have influence. These cuts are short-sighted. There's no other way to put it. And to paraphrase the former Secretary of Defense, an outstanding Marine, Secretary of Defense Mattis, if we don't fund these soft power and diplomatic programs, then we need to buy more ammunition. In fact, we need to buy more ammunition anyway, but if we don't fund these programs, we won't be afford to buy all the ammunition we need. I oppose this package on the basis of both its contents and what it would mean for the future of bipartisanship in this chamber and the congressional power of the purse. Let me be clear. With this vote, we are surrendering our constitutional responsibilities and authorities to the executive. we are indeed close to violating our oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. Too close for comfort. And I would urge my colleagues to reject this. And I yield the floor.